Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another day in the life of a military wife. And today's topic actually kind of developed in a really unusual way. I had a game plan like I normally do, and then life happened, and discussing some things with friends, things were brought back to my recollection. I just remembered things that I had learned from college, and I felt like it was a time to share this. So we are always dealing with education with our kids, ourselves. Learning is a lifelong process. And with the military community, we're always having to start over because we move all the time. So there are some fundamentals, there are some things that we can implement and become aware of that will help make those transitions from educational systems work better, especially for our kids. And that's what I've been dealing with is my kids, because I'm a mom. That's what I deal with. So I wanted to share some things that I remembered from college time and some things that friends pointed me in the direction of. Anyway, so that's what we're dealing with today. I am your host, Sam Wolf, and this is Life of a Military Wife. All right, so let's dive on into this. One thing that has come up recently, and I mentioned this previously in our moving segment about how when you're moving to a new duty station, especially with children or even just yourself, if you're continuing your own education, it's really important to get involved with the educational community around you and find out what resources you have and what the differences are from one state or country to another. Because there are differences in how things are applied or done or approached. And we have really benefited a lot in our current duty station. We have been blessed with an absolutely amazing school district and school that have gone out of their way to include parents and want parent involvement and input and community involvement. Even through COVID, they have worked to find ways to involve parents, and I really appreciate that, considering it is a predominantly military school. Well, not military school in what you think of colloquially, but a school that has mostly military children attending. So, active duty military family children. Anyway, you know what I mean. So that said, I'm grateful for the involvement because it's helped me be aware of what's going on with my kids so that I can help them more effectively. And there's a transition that happens in elementary school from earlier grades, particularly kindergarten through second. The transition kind of happens in second and becomes really predominant and pronounced in third grade and going on to the later grades. And that I really struggled to kind of understand, even though I have a degree in family life science, human development, child development, I've taken classes on all this stuff, cognitive development, I still had a hard time really grasping the nuance of this transition and how it would actually affect my children, because they were going through it and they were having some struggles. And I was really, really impressed with a breakdown that one of my kids' teachers, the way they phrased it, because it made it really clear. And here's what it is. It's switching from learning to read and learning to write and those basic fundamentals to reading to learn. So that really is the big transition, learning to read and then reading to learn. And that switch over in their educational process can be hard for kids because they've gotten used to one system of what education in school is, and then they need to transition to a totally different concept that they're going to use for the rest of their life. And so we've had some hiccups with kids of ours, our wonderful children, in that transition. And in right now, dealing with what's going on, it's also been hard for kids because a lot of cognitive development and language development and social emotional development has to do with facial expressions and communication. And with the current situation we're in right now, not all of the schools have gotten rid of masking protocols. There's still masking protocols for kids or even for the adults. And that makes it hard for the kids when they can't read the emotions on the adults that they're interacting with or the kids they're interacting with. It makes communication harder for the kids. And again, there's quite a bit of research on how facial expressions and it helps with, communication and all that. Body language is just really important in communication. And so that's adding to the already complexity of kids' education in general. So this got me talking with a friend. Long story short. Well, no, long story longer. But this got me talking with a friend who'd gone through some of the same struggles with her kids in this transitional process. And she pointed me towards a resource that once I started reading it, I'm like, oh, this is just a new take on a concept I vaguely remembered. I remembered studying to some extent in college. And that was learning styles, but specifically concrete, abstract, sequential, and random, and how those all factor in. It's the Gregorian one. If you Google the Gregorian learning styles stuff, it'll pop up. But I really liked the way she broke it down. And so I want to share the book that my friend shared with me, with you guys today, as well as just briefly hit on another one I found in my going through my old textbooks-ness, because I do that and I kept them. Yeah, I'm really glad I kept a lot of my textbooks now. They've turned out to be beneficial, but I've already told you that. But anyway, the book I'm talking about, I want to kind of focus on some of the information I got today, is The Way They Learn from Catherine Tobias. And I really liked how she starts it off with not even getting to the learning styles, but getting to important things to keep in mind when working with kids. And that is observe their patterns of behavior. Don't just start, assuming you understand what's going on with them, because kids are really complex and they're still learning how to communicate. And again, with the different situations that have occurred in just, life, the universe, and everything, it's been more complicated for kids as of late with their communication for everything we've just talked about. So observing is really important, because then you can start to understand what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, how do they succeed, those sorts of things. While you're observing, listening. Oftentimes, I feel like as a parent and just in general, we are so focused on just getting things done and getting what we need done that we're not always listening to our kids or the kids around us if we're in an educational or environment or whatever. We're not always listening to how they speak and how they express themselves. And one of the concepts that she brought up in here is that it doesn't matter if you've ever traveled to a foreign country, which as military, a lot of us have been around people who speak foreign languages or been in those sorts of situations. It doesn't matter how clearly or how loud or how slow someone says something in another language. If you have no grasp of that language, you're not going to understand them. And so learning the language, learning that medium of communication is really what's going to break down that misunderstanding or finding some other way to communicate. So that is really important, is listening and figuring out how the child communicates, because that is really how you're going to understand feedback and where you're going. And then the next step is experimenting. And I realized with my current kid who's having some struggles, I went straight to experimenting. It's like, let's try this and let's try that. Let's see what sticks to the wall. And I realized I wasn't observing and listening as much as I should have. I wasn't doing these other principles, which I knew. I grew up with 7 Habits sort of stuff. My mom taught it. My mom was an educator. And she was a teacher for years and taught 7 Habits as well. And so I know that seek to understand and then seek to be understood is a huge factor in life in general. And yet somehow I always manage to just, I don't know. I need reminders. But then, yeah, go to experiment. Find out what works, figure out what doesn't work, and focus on what does. And then that's exactly what leads us into another one. Focus on natural strengths, not weaknesses. Kids are very, very conscious of what they can't do. They don't really need to be reminded. They need to be encouraged on what they can do. And understanding that everyone is different. People have different strengths and weaknesses, and that's awesome. And some people are going to learn some things faster than others, and that's okay. And then the next one is learn. Continue learning about learning styles in general. Keep increasing your education and looking for information. And I feel like those are 5 really good principles just to keep in mind, because it's just hard enough with kids in general. And sometimes I think we get too caught up in the experiment. Let's just throw things at the wall and figure out what sticks, that we don't always listen or observe or, focus on what they are doing right. And that was a pitfall I realized we had unintentionally fallen in with our child, was that we were focused so much on what they were struggling with that we had not emphasized to them that we understood what they were succeeding with, what they were doing well with. And so the other day, sat down and was talking to him about, okay, what's going on? How can we work on this? Blah, 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 blah. And just got the feeling that I needed to let my kid know that I loved them. I knew they were amazing. I knew they had these different strengths and how intelligent they were and all of this other stuff. And I just wanted the rest of the world to see them the way I did. And my kids started crying, and I'm like, what's wrong? And they're like, you really think that? I'm like, yeah, I thought you knew that. And I'm like, oh, crud. Evidently, I need to be a lot more obvious and be a lot more explicit with my kid, a lot more direct about how I think they are doing well. And so that's something I think all parents can always be reminded of, is that yes, we want our child to grow and learn and develop and strive for excellence, but we also need to make sure they know we love them. Because my mom would always say, no one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And I feel like that's really true. So breaking down the Gregoric model for learning styles, they fall into a range. And I want to kind of give you a visualization here. Just think kind of like of a graph chart, the ones that are like with the 4 quadrants, like the 4 sections. And each one of these different segments we're talking about is going to be one of those sections. Nobody is completely one or the other combinations. Everyone is their own mixture of it all. And the closer you get to the center, the X, like the, where the 2 lines meet of that 4 quadrant graph, the center of it, that is someone who's like fully balanced amongst all 4. Which honestly, I've never met anyone like that. I'm not saying they don't exist, just haven't met them yet. But usually people fall somewhere on the graph. They'll lean towards different aspects, but they have a little bit of everything. So don't be too quick to just pigeonhole your kid into something or pigeonhole yourself into something. This really is going to be something that takes observation and time to figure out in what situations and they react what way, or so on and so forth. So the first part is perception. It's the fact that people in general look at the world and in learning in 2 different ways, concrete and abstract. So concrete perceptive is the people, it's a concept of that things that are tangible, things that are there, things you can see, smell, taste, touch, those sorts of things, the senses that you're aware of. They focus more on the here and now. And so that's the concrete. Abstract perception is the opposite scale of concrete. It is focusing more on visualization, conceptualizing ideas, understanding abstract concepts, which abstract, I just realized I used the word in the definition. Sorry for that. But basically looking beyond what is going on and finding the subtle implications. And like I said before, everyone's somewhere on the spectrum. Everyone can do both, but what do you do more naturally? What do you do more frequently? Or do you do different ones in different situations? So that is the points of view or the perception aspect of the Gregorian model. The second is ordering what we know. How do you use the information? So we talked about how you perceive what's going on and learn, and then how do you use that or apply it? And that's the ordering. Sequential ordering is the first one. And with the sequential, it's very linear. Like people who like to follow instructions. There's always two people, the ones that will read the instructions and follow them and the ones who wing it. That is a really good example of this. Sequential ordering individuals are likely to follow a recipe or follow the instructions when putting together something from IKEA, or, those sorts of things. They like lists. They like, method to it. Random is the other side of this concept. And with random, there's not a particular sequence. They look at a problem or a situation in more of chunks. So let's say if they were planning an event, instead of making a checklist, to-do list of things to do one after another, they might break things into categories. Like, here's what I need to do for the venue. Here's what I need to do for the entertainment. Here's what I need to do for catering. And here's what I need to do for activities. And break it into things like that. So it's a little bit more free-flowing. There's still organization to it, but it's a different type of organization. And it can be really hard for people who are list makers, who are very sequential, to do the other. So what I was talking to you about before was the fact that then when you combined the ordering and the perceptions, you get 4 different segments or quadrants, however you want to think about it, that you can end up in. And those 4 different quadrants are concrete sequential, abstract sequential, abstract random, and concrete random. And these talk about the different learning styles. So, and like I said, everyone is a combination of all 4, so you'll be somewhere on the spectrum, but you usually will end up in a quadrant. You might end up on a line in between a quadrant, but you'll end up somewhere. So this is not hard and fast. That's one reason why observation and experimentation, like trying different things, is important, because I'll get into that in a bit. So concrete sequential, the hardworking, conventional, accurate, stable, dependable, consistent, organized. These are then abstract. So abstract sequential is analytic, objective, knowledgeable, thorough, structured, logical, deliberate, and systematic. Abstract random, sensitive, compassionate, perceptive, imaginative, idealistic, sentimental, spontaneous, and flexible. Creative random, or concrete random. I know these things, I swear, I promise. Concrete random is quick, intuitive, curious, realistic, creative, innovative, depending on how you pronounce that, instinctive, and adventurous. Now, those are I mean, maybe that description works for you, but for me, I like examples. And what I loved about this book is she does give some examples to those different aspects of it. So, in regards to the concrete sequential, one of the examples that she gives is that it's like it's the whole concept of it's too hard, or I don't like it, or I don't get it, or whatever. That just doesn't factor for them. For them, it's a whole thing about duty and obligation and, getting what needs to be done. And so it's kind of a must see it through. And she talks about this one aspect where they had some sort of seminar or group thing that they were at, and one of the couples showed up late, and they're like, well, why are you late? Well, we rented a bunch of movies from pay-per-view, and they were horrible, but we had to watch them all, so we woke up late because we were tired. Wait, what? You wouldn't have been, huh? But that was their thing. Like, they paid for it. They did it. Like, this was their thing. And so they weren't going to waste that money. And so they were going to watch it and get their value. And we've talked about this a couple times of paradigm shifts. There's times where you have these mentalities, and sometimes you can step back and analyze yourself and go, wait, what am I thinking? Like, there's other options out there. Really? People think differently? But, so yeah, that's kind of a good example that they paid for something. They were going to get the value out of it. There's one I can think of is the people who go to an all-you-can-eat buffet and will keep eating until they feel sick because they want to get the value out of the amount they spent on the all-you-can-eat buffet. Yeah, I'm only saying that because I have been at times that kind of person. I had to retrain my brain, be like, I don't really need to eat more. I'm good. So I can say that because I can wrap myself out. I've had that problem. So that is the concrete sequential. Now, with them, they can get stressed out sometimes if there's not organization, predictability, schedules, and routines, things like that for them. And then, so next is abstract sequential. And these people are also organized because of the sequential aspect of it. But they are really good resources for information. They're logical. They're good at analyzing things. They need a lot of time to work. You don't really want to rush them. They don't enjoy that. And so I've known a couple people like this. There's some people who I just love discussing politics and law and quantum mechanics with, because they just have these really great minds to grasp these abstract, deep concepts. And I love talking to people like that. I wish I was more like that. I have those interests and I enjoy those conversations, but I'd never consider myself one of those brilliant deep thinkers. But that's really kind of what the abstract sequentials are. They're really those kind of thinkers. And for them, they like having specific goals. They like logic and reason. They like being given a job and being left alone to do it. And that really kind of is my husband. He loves to think about stuff and he hates being micromanaged. Absolutely hates it. So that really kind of fits him. So the next is abstract random. And really these are people. These are the ones who get along with people, who get people, who are just good with people. And part of that is they just really need frequent honest praise and reassurance. They have feelings that they just want justified, and they are really good at recognizing what's going on with other people and that sort of things. Everyone knows someone like this, somebody who can walk into a room and just read the room. They can tell who's having a good day, who's having a bad day. They're just really perceptive to people's emotions or body language and whatnot. And things that can just negative perceptions that sometimes people will have of them is that they're unpredictable because they are focused on other things, on what's going on around them and people's feelings and emotions and all that other stuff. They may not always follow a logical, ordered method that is observable to other people. They don't always take a hard stand on things because they do follow their gut a lot. They can be very sensitive and sometimes critical because, again, they follow their gut. And so that's just one of those things, but they are sociable and adaptable, and they can be rather spontaneous and concerned for others. So for concrete random, which is the last quadrant, what people will really notice about them is usually they have a sense of humor, they're independent, creative, but they can also be uncompromising and stubborn and impulsive. So they're kind of just free-flowing. They're them. And again, I feel like my husband is more on this side sometimes. Like, I really feel like he ends up in the more random category some days. But it's just, that's how they work. They like having their own method to their madness or their own organizational chaos. Like, they can see the organization. They can see, they know where they're going. And it doesn't really bug them if other people can't see that. And so that's kind of where they're at. And it's interesting because all of these styles, all of these things are good things. And that's the one thing you need to understand is learning styles is completely separate from learning disabilities. A learning disability will impact how you learn. A learning style is just how everyone learns slightly differently. We're all different people. We have different ways of looking at the world. And so when I was saying we're all kind of those different quadrants and everything, I wanted to kind of give you an example. So for me, when you leave me alone and say, hey, X, Y, and Z needs to get done, I become very almost OCD organized. I make lists. I'm very precise. And I think it just comes from being a military wife and being outnumbered with kids. When my husband's gone, there's more little people than me. And it's like a survival of the fittest. And I have to have lists and organization and a method or I just don't survive. Like, it just doesn't work as well. And I've realized that a schedule and a routine is good for my kids. And if it's good for my kids, it's great for me because it keeps my sanity. And so when it's just me functioning as a mom, I am super like that. I am super organized and sequential. I like having a plan and I like sticking with the plan, and deviating from the plan can really stress me out. However, in other situations where I'm not in charge and I'm not responsible, and if it's a social interaction thing, I'm not going to worry about a timetable as much. I'm more worried about, well, what am I, how is so-and-so doing? And just, paying attention to how people are feeling. So I feel like I'm a completely different interaction or learning style, depending on if I feel responsible for the situation or if I feel like I'm a participant in the situation. And that's important to understand that people have a spectrum in how they handle things, especially when interacting with children. With us as adults, we have been shaped by nurture. We've been influenced by our environment and our circumstances as we've grown up. And so we've learned to adapt and maybe adjust how we interact with the world around us. Whereas kids are far more based in nature than nurture. They are the way they are. They haven't adapted or changed as much. And so it's important for observation and listening so that we can really grasp where they're at, because the ways we've learned to adapt or change they haven't done that yet. And so they may have a more difficult time interacting with learning styles that they just don't comprehend because they're very foreign or they're opposite of their own natural learning style. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to cover this today. Teaching, or the way they learn from Cynthia Tobias is where I got a lot of the information from today. But another resource I wanted to share, and again, when I was going through just looking for resources and looking for things in general, and some of the conversations I've had at the curriculum meetings with the school that I'm a part of, the curriculum committee, it got me thinking about this textbook. It's a book, but it's a textbook. It's full of research. It's called Awakening Children's Minds: How Parents and Teachers Can Make a Difference, and it's by Laura E. Breck. And this is really good. I started reading through it, and I couldn't believe how much I'd forgotten and how much didn't apply to me or relate to me at the time. And so I just didn't retain it. And so I'm really excited to go back into that one and deep dive into that. So if either of those sound interesting, I recommend you try to go get a copy on those. Or if you would like to just learn more about learning styles and these sorts of things in general, please throw this out, because honestly, I really feel like everyone should try to be a lifelong learner. There's always going to be things we're needing to learn and adapt to. If nothing else, every place we live as military families is different. And so we have to learn a whole new system of interacting with the community that we find ourselves in. Whether it's the education systems that our kids are involved in, or just the command structures we're dealing with, or the culture of the surrounding community of where we're stationed. And so knowing how you learn, so that you can find a good fit or find a way to adapt or interact in a positive, meaningful way with those around you is always helpful. And again, helping our kids too. So that's kind of where I wanted to go with this week. I'm really grateful, again, like I said, to friends and other people who kind of gave me the idea to steer the topic in this direction. I was actually gonna do something completely different, but again, I really do love input from listeners and from friends and stuff, and I hope this is helpful to you. So with that said, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife.